for the area, but how did this happen? What's next, and how can we avoid future issues? We'll discuss it all. Plus, show us your story, your resilience, your memories of recovery from the last decade. I make a plea to you to help with a community art project. And sound the bell. It seems like round one of construction is coming to a close. What's next? We'll talk about all of it this week ahead. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me on This Week Ahead. I want to start This Week Ahead by talking about water, the life force of our species, and our most important resource the city provides to the region. It's been a fairly hot topic for about 7 days or so, as we have witnessed higher than average temperatures, plus a mandatory water restriction. That restriction has been lifted, and the issues that caused supply hiccups at the water treatment plant have all been resolved, at least most of them. You see, part of the issue that caused a 5-day water restriction for outside water use was indeed a reduction in capacity at the water treatment plant. We had 4 wells malfunction that reduced the amount of raw water we were able to treat to about 30% or so. But that's only part of the issue. We were able to make about 9 million gallons a day. Typically in early June, that's probably enough. But our treatment operators saw what they saw during this stretch was potentially maybe a record water usage by the community. We'll talk to him in a moment, but our Assistant Public Works Director, Jason Sorensen, said in his 15 years working for the city, first as a treatment plant superintendent, he's never actually seen our community use 11.5 million gallons a day in early June before. That means we had a supply and a demand issue. So how do we fix that? What are we doing to avoid water restrictions in the future? And the answer to both of those questions are, we're working on it. But first, it starts with us. We haven't talked enough about water usage as a city. Like how we have a city ordinance that actually has a watering schedule based on your address, or how NAS will give us a more abundant and reliable source of water when we finally connect to Lake Sakakawea. Those conversations will help us better understand what our capabilities for water treatment are and how we can avoid a 5-day restriction going forward. So let's expand that conversation off the bat. I want to bring in Jason Sorensen. He's our Assistant Public Works Director to help us understand the state of water and the wells that we have, the management techniques, and why it's not as easy as some may seem or some think it is to avoid hiccups like we just witnessed. Jason, thanks for taking time to speak with us today.
Great to be here.
All right. So first, let's talk about the malfunctions that caused us to have a lower supply of raw water. What actually happened to our 4 wells?
Let's see. I'll refer to them by the names that we refer to them, which is probably not, for common for people to listen or hear them that way. But well 14 is a well that we had running, just fine. It was working on a Saturday. And then the Monday and Tuesday when we had the 104, 105 degree temps, we saw demand starting to rise. We tried to turn that well back on that was just turned off 2 days earlier, and it didn't come back on. So electricians came over dead short in the pump, or in the motor that drives the pump. So scrambled a well service company. They happened to have one on the shelf, so came up and had that one going on Monday. One of the other wells, we refer to it as well E. That well failed back in March, and it was a pretty catastrophic failure. It was running just fine and then just stopped pumping. Once we got a well service company up here in March to diagnose that, we discovered that, bad motor, bad pump. These things really hadn't been in the ground that long. And then once we started digging into it a little further, we found that we had the screen for the well was basically full of sand and rocks. So that kind of clued us in that there were some additional problems. So they brought in a camera machine and found that the casing for the well actually had holes in it. So it was bringing sand and gravel into the well. And that's kind of what destroyed the pump. We were pumping sand and gravel through the pump. So That well has been worked on and off since I think it's the 26th of March. They had to order parts and pieces to put a liner inside to line the casing. They had to order a new motor, new pump. Those took a little time to get here. We had some COVID delay issues, but those all came in this week, and that well became functional. I believe it was on Wednesday or Thursday of this week. And then wells 5 and 6, we refer to them. Those wells themselves didn't fail. Those wells worked fine. But the transmission line that takes that water from the wells to the water treatment plant, we've had some problems with it over the last couple of years. So we had that scheduled as part of our water main replacement project this year. That contractor had started a couple of weeks ago, but that work wasn't done and wasn't complete yet by the time the high demand started. So those two wells should be back online by the end of this week or the early part of next week.
Okay, so we're in good graces now, Jason. But
yeah, especially with the rain.
yeah,
Demand really fluctuates a lot with rain. Yeah, we can get a quarter of an inch of rain, and we'll see demand go from 10 million a day down to 7. So a lot of people, obviously if it rains, people don't water as much. So that helps.
so we had that you mentioned we had one well stitched up pretty quick, but it wasn't until the third-ish day that we actually had a crew on site to fix. Well, remind me, that was 8, right? Was that well E? That was
Well, we had 14 in E, and then 8 is another one that we've been working on this week.
okay. So
Just as a bit of a routine maintenance.
Here's kind of the question that I'm going to stick you with here, Jason. Why did we have to wait for someone from elsewhere? I think in this case it was Minnesota to come here and fix some of these issues. Why don't we have someone locally to fix these type of issues? And how come we don't have parts that are on hand so we can make these fixes faster for something so important like our water?
Past experience when I managed the water plant, it didn't appear that any of the local well companies had the capability of doing wells that are as big as ours. A lot of your residential wells are probably like 4-inch wells, and we're dealing with 8 and 10-inch, 6, 8, 10-inch wells. So takes a pretty good sized rig. So we generally have a company out of Fargo that pulls some wells for us, and then another company out of Spicer, Minnesota that pulls wells for us.
So it's not as simple as just having someone that generally drills holes come and drill or come repair our transmission lines or our motors or anything like that. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
It really is.
Because of the size and the volume, essentially.
Yeah. Which, kind of leads to the second part of your question. Why don't we have parts and pieces on hand? And, they're large pumps, they're large motors, which means they're generally very expensive. So, and the other issue is 14 wells, they're all different shapes and sizes. So, which one do you decide that you're going to keep a spare for? The pump for well 8 or well 14 wouldn't work in well E, and vice versa. So it becomes an issue of how many dollars worth of parts and pieces do you want to have on the shelf. It could be very expensive to have that stuff sitting there.
I want to shift and talk about our water supply real quick, Jason.
Sure.
We have 14 wells that we pull from 2 aquifers underground. And that supply is treated and then sent out to Minot and much of the NAS users that have pipes currently included in the NAS program, like Mohawk, Kedmare, Minot Air Force Base. And we also supply some of the rural water operators, North Prairie and other rural areas with our water supply. Given this occurrence, do we not have enough water on hand to treat? Are we oversupplying other areas with our water?
I don't believe so. When you start rattling off the communities and the rural water systems that we're supplying water to, it's a pretty long list. Berthold, Kenmare, Mulhall, Sherwood, and you have all seasons rural water, um, Upper Souris rural water, North Prairie rural water. Like I said, it's a long list, but when you look at their average daily usage is about 600,000 gallons a day, and so far in June they've been using about 820,000 gallons per day. So when you put that in comparison of the 11 and a half or that we were trying to treat in June to match supply, it's less than, I guess that's probably about 10% of our overall demand.
And that goes to what I said before I brought you on, what you've said now. This water restriction, not just, yeah, we had a reduction in supply, but really what we saw was just a high demand for water in such a hot, kind of drought like early part of summer.
Yeah, it was, kind of a perfect storm.
Perfect is an interesting word to use for that, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
sort of imperfect, but this is just sort of another example of the importance of completing that NAS project, which has been in the works for decades now, almost as long as I've been on this earth. We've been trying to pipe water into the rural reaches and pull water from the big lake. It's not just this water is not just to mine up, but those other communities that have no other means. Correct me if I'm wrong, right here. No other means of quality potable water. We're a few years away from actually pulling water from Lake Sakakawea. When that actually happens, when all of that pipe is laid and we're moving water north, will that additional water prevent things like the water restriction that we just had?
I mean, it certainly should help. Right now, when you add up all of our wells, we probably have about 15 million gallons of total capacity. The NAS system is designed for this first phase. I think will be about 18 MGD. That's the treatment plant, and max would be and then the water plant. So yeah, first phase would be about 18 million gallons. And in my 15 years with the city, I've never seen any demand approach anywhere near that. Our biggest day ever is about 14 million gallons a day. So.
And that's big because we had a hot stretch there when we were on a water restriction and we were seeing an 11.5 million gallon demand. So that's a lot of water being used when we get to 14 million in our community.
Yeah, and when you look at our usages at different times of the year, we kind of know how much water it takes to basically sustain life around here. In the middle of January, there's not much car washing. There's basically just people taking showers, washing dishes, and flushing toilets. Just everyday odds and ends. And our demand there is probably between 5.5 and 6 million gallons a day. So all this stuff we see additional through in the spring and the summer, it's all the outdoor uses that kind of impact us.
That is a big difference, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it's a perfect segue to my next question. So how can we avoid instances like this water restriction we had when things unplanned happen? It seems like, well, it seems to some that it happens every year. It doesn't. I've been with the city for over 5 years, and this has happened a total of 3 times. Once was due to construction for hazard mitigation flood control walls by the treatment plant. We had to take that, that main line for our main well out of commission for a little bit to pipe it through a wall. And another time, I think it was 2 years ago, high usage, and maybe there was a well issue. But 3 times in 5 years isn't nothing, Jason. What can
Right.
we do as a community to prevent something like this? Because it caused a lot of stir and conversation. What can we do as citizens to help our water demand and supply?
Just be cognizant. Water is a very valuable resource, and treat it as such. I can't count during the summer how many times I drive to work in the rain and how many sprinkler systems I count that are on. So a lot of sprinkler systems, they get turned on.
Mine was on this morning. Full disclosure, I had to turn it
Nice
off.
job.
We're halfway through the first cycle, so sorry. Anyway,
Yeah.
continue. I just needed to admit that.
And it happens, but yeah, so be cognizant. I guess it's probably the strongest wording I can put. I don't know how else to state it?
Well, here's a way to state it. It's stated, there's a statement in our code of ordinance for the city that a lot of people don't know. And this is something that we haven't done a good enough job. I'm looking at me here of communicating out. It's something that's going to be focused now, given this. It's actually, we do have a water schedule for the city, and it's based on address. Now, full disclosure, we're going to tweak it, right, Jason? We're going to try to tweak it to make it a little bit easier for people, because the way it's currently written is a little bit hard to comply with. It's been in effect for 13 years, something like that.
Yeah, I think about 2009.
So we've had it for a while. We just haven't really pushed it too much. And it's a watering schedule, even number days, how you can water on what it's going to be anyway. Even number days, water Monday, Wednesday, Friday, odd number addresses, will be Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. That's the schedule. We're going to put that out a lot so people understand that. Do you think if we can get full compliance on that, that will help, stagger the use, obviously, and help us manage our demand a little bit better from a treatment standpoint?
Yeah, it certainly helps. I was at the water plant in 2009 when that ordinance was passed. It was actually something that I brought forward and asked the public works director at the time to look at. What we noticed back then, we can watch our elevated storage tank levels throughout the day, and how they trend. Pumps fill them up, and then the people use water and they draw down. So they basically go in a cyclical manner all day long. And we started, kind of queuing in on these huge demands that we would see on Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. So they start about 5 a.m. and they would there'd be like really just a sudden drop in these elevated storage tanks that would last throughout the morning. So then when we suffer that high usage, it depletes our storage. Basically, we just kind of hold our own throughout the day, and then we try to rebuild that storage then overnight when people are sleeping and aren't using water. So the ask was to try to balance that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so that we're seeing a demand a little bit every day instead of just a huge demand on three particular days.
Okay. That's great, Jason. Again, look for more reminders about your watering schedule. It'll be just like we have a collection schedule for your trash too. I mean, it's really no different. It's just to help. I mean, we can't collect trash all in one day. We can't make water all in one day. It's a lot easier to balance that out between the weekdays. Jason, what else should we know about water supply, how the water is managed, or anything else in between?
Jeez, I don't know.
Loaded question.
I think we covered a lot. I like I said, I've always said when I worked at the water treatment plant that we're a pretty one of the more taken for granted utilities. We very seldom get calls from people to tell us, thanks, took a nice hot shower this morning. It was great.
Do you need me to text you every morning now? Is that what I got to do?
That'd be great. But when we have instances where we ask people to restrict, or if we have to turn water off for maintenance, then we definitely hear about it. So, we do as much as we can and work as hard as we can to try to keep this system up and operating. There's staff at the plant round the clock, 24/7, 365. If there's water breaks, we get out and fix them as soon as we can. It's a very, very large, very complex system of treatment facilities, pipe networks, valves, reservoirs, pump stations that get water to your tap. So it's a complicated puzzle, and we do the best we can to keep it going.
And it's not many people doing that either. 365 days, we can't stop treating water for a single day, and it's less than 20 people that work in that facility doing that, right?
Yeah, think about 13 full-time people.
Yeah, so they're kind of like referees in a football game. You don't want to notice them because that means they're doing their job, right? You don't.
Correct.
But we do want to give a big shout out because this was a stressful several days for those guys at the treatment plant, no doubt.
Yeah, it was. We were down to kind of our last 15% of water and storage, and that's it's not a good situation to be in, for sure.
Yeah. All right. We'll do what we can as a community to help curb that. You have your guys keep making that quality water for my hot showers.
We're going to try.
All right.
It's
Thanks,
all
Jason.
for you, Darren.
Yeah, just me, right? All right. Appreciate that. Okay, that's Jason Sorensen, our Assistant Public Works Director. He's had a ton of proverbial fires to put out this last week, so he's been a good sport. I appreciate you taking some time to join us this morning, Jason. Thanks again.
Yeah, no problem. It's been fun.
All right. Take care. Have yourself a good rest of the weekend.
You too.
All right. All right. Coming up this week ahead, is a deadline to what I consider a pretty cool project that we're working on as a community. So my last broadcast that we did here 2 weeks ago, I took a week off. Sorry about that. We talked about the Resilient Together event on June 26th, the 10-year anniversary of the crest of the Mouse River, the 2011 flood. This event on the 26th is going to be a lot of things. And one of the things will be a community mural, a mosaic of resilience. It's something that will showcase our individual stories and memories of the flood, of the recovery, and of our resilience that we discovered within ourselves. I'm asking, no. I'm pleading for you to help us build this community art piece by going to mouseriveranniversary.com, upload a photo, 2 photos, an entire scrapbook of what you think represents your thoughts and memories from the last 10 years or so. It's going to look something like this. We want to build this mosaic of our community. It doesn't have to be flood carnage photos. It could be a family photo at the state fair, which was canceled for the first time ever in 2011. It could be the day you moved back into a recovered flood home. It could be the first day of school photo of yourself from 1978 outside of Lincoln School, which no longer exists due to the flood. The content doesn't matter. Well, I shouldn't say that. The content should matter, but it should matter most to you and how it reminds you of your struggles, of your recovery, of your prosperity, of your resilience. Help us build the piece that remind us all of our journeys. Upload a picture or 2 at mouseriveranniversary.com. Now, coming up this week ahead, we're wrapping up what will seem like round 1 of projects and detours in the Magic City. You'll see a little less orange around town, most notably on business, on the busiest thoroughfares, like Burdick Expressway, east by the hospital. Work underground on that major Burdick project is all but wrapped up, so that project will take a bit of a hiatus until after the North Dakota State Fair. Traffic control will be opened up on Burdick and the streets adjacent to it as well. It's only for a bit, as ADA ramps from 16th Street West all the way to 20th Street East will begin after the fair. With that, you'll see some quick work and some closed lanes throughout that stretch. Then the big disruption happens. The surface of Burdick from First to Valley will be replaced with a mill and overlay project that will disrupt traffic a bit further. We'll make sure to give you some advance notice before all of that happens. But look forward to seeing a few less orange cones this week ahead. Other projects that'll lighten up, by the way, is 4th Avenue from Broadway to Walder Street. That will open up back up sometime midweek. Work on Sunset and Elk Drive should be finishing up next week, or if the weather gets in the way, maybe the week after. I like to hedge a little bit. Western Avenue here near City Hall, west of 6th Street, that'll open up midweek. And you'll see some intermittent closures on 6th Street Northwest between 2nd Avenue and 5th Avenue by that Lincoln Elementary School area. Finally, watch for lane closures on 16th Street near Perkett School. Contractors will be working on patches along that stretch. For the rest of the lane and road closures, you can find our map. You can use it online. It's minotnd.org/road closures. Of course, if you want to see what else is queued up for this year for projects, that map is available online as well, minotnd.org/projects. You can see a nice interactive map for everything across the community. Okay, that's going to do it for me on this week ahead. Make sure you subscribe to our weekly newsletters at minotnd.org/the latest. We send out about 6 a month. Sign up for that. Don't miss a thing. Of course, if you are looking to make sure you have all the alerts, like potentially water restrictions, you can find that at minotnd.org/alerts. And of course, you can always find us at your favorite social media on your favorite social media platforms at City of Minot. Thanks again for joining me on this Sunday morning, and enjoy your week ahead.